Hello, welcome to Beyond the Paradigm. I'm Paul. Thank you for listening and welcome back if you've listened before. So having just spent 3 weeks talking about the UFO phenomena, I decided that I'd conclude that topic and I did so last week. Now I've shifted my focus to another rabbit hole. I've recently signed up to Instagram and now a new one by Meta again, Threads. And you can get me on both Instagram and Threads at Paradigm1979. I'm also on Twitter at Paradigm_79. So you can follow me on there. On my Instagram page, I will be posting relevant images sometimes that are relevant to this podcast, due to this being an audio podcast at the moment. Some of the topics that I will cover, you can go on Instagram and you'll be able to see some of the images regarding the things that I'm talking about. So this is episode 9 in relation to a group called the Finders, Jeffrey Epstein and the CIA, and what links all them together. So, Jeffrey Epstein, the wealthy financier and associate of many of the world's elite, was found dead in his prison cell on the 10th of August 2019, and his death was ruled as a suicide by hanging. Epstein had been arrested on July 6, 2019 on federal charges for the sex trafficking of minors in Florida and New York. This was not the only time he'd been arrested for similar types of offences. In 2005, police at Palm Beach, Florida, began investigating Epstein after a parent reported that he had sexually abused her 14-year-old daughter. Epstein pleaded guilty and was convicted in 2008 by a Florida state court of procuring a child for prostitution and of soliciting a prostitute. He served almost 13 months in custody, but with extensive work release. He basically was allowed to go home. And he was only convicted of these 2 crimes as part of a controversial plea deal. Federal officials had actually identified another 36 girls, and some of them were as young as 14, whom Epstein had allegedly sexually abused. So who was he, Jeffrey Epstein, and how did he become so wealthy and gain so many friends and associates among the world's elite? And what links does the mysterious group called the Finders have with Epstein and the CIA? Rosa Monckton, the former CEO of Tiffany & Co., told Vanity Fair for a 2003 article that Epstein was very enigmatic and a classic iceberg. She said, "You think you know him, and then you peel off another ring of the onion skin and there's something else extraordinary underneath." She said, "What you see is not what you get." Jeffrey Edward Epstein, born January 20th, 1953. Epstein was born and raised in New York City. He began his professional life by teaching at the Dalton School despite lacking a college degree. After his dismissal from school, which it was alleged was because he had shown inappropriate behaviour towards underage students, he entered the banking and finance sector, working at Bear Stearns in various roles. Epstein joined Bear Stearns in 1976 as a low-level junior assistant to a floor trader. He swiftly moved up to become an options trader, working in the special products division, and then advised the bank's wealthiest clients, such as Seagram President Edgar Bronfman, on tax mitigation strategies Jimmy Kane, the bank's later chief executive, praised Epstein's skill with wealthy clients and complex products. In 1980, 4 years after joining Bear Stearns, Epstein became a limited partner. However, in 1981, Epstein was asked to leave Bear Stearns, according to his sworn testimony, for being guilty of a Reg D violation, basically a trading violation. Even though Epstein departed abruptly, he remained close to Kane and Greenberg and was a client of Bear Stearns until its collapse in 2008. Stephen Hoffenberg hired Epstein in 1987 as a consultant for Towers Financial Corporation. It was unaffiliated with the company of the same name that was founded in 1998 and acquired by Old National Bancorp in 2014. A collection agency that bought debts people owed to hospitals. That's what they did, banks and phone companies. Hoffenberg set Epstein up in offices in Villard houses in Manhattan, and he paid him $25,000 per month for his consulting work, which in today's money, as of 2022, it was approximately $64,000 a month. A good wage. And that's an understatement. In 1988, while Epstein was still consulting for Hoffenberg, he founded his own financial management firm called J. Epstein and Company. The company was said by Epstein to have been formed to manage the assets of clients with more than $1 billion in net worth, although others have expressed skepticism that he was restrictive of the clients that he took. The only publicly known billionaire client of Epstein was Leslie Wexner, a chairman and CEO of L Brands and Victoria's Secret. In 1996, Epstein changed the name of his firm to the Financial Trust Company, and for tax advantages, based it on the island of St. Thomas in the US Virgin Islands. By relocating to the US Virgin Islands, Epstein was able to reduce federal income taxes by 90%. The US Virgin Islands acted as an offshore tax haven, while at the same time offering the advantages of being part of the United States banking system. Between 2002 and 2005, Epstein invested $80 million in D.B. Zwirn Special Opportunities Fund. It was a hedge fund that invested in illiquid debt securities. In November 2006, Epstein attempted to redeem his investment after he was informed of accounting irregularities in the fund. By this time, his investment had grown to $140 million. By this time, with his investment grown, Epstein, a month after the federal investigation had begun, invested $57 million in Bear Stearns, a high-grade structured credit strategies enhanced leverage hedge fund. That's a mouthful. This fund was highly leveraged in mortgage-backed collateralized debt obligations, or CDOs. By the time that Bear Stearns' fund began to fail in May 2007, Epstein had begun to negotiate a plea deal with the US Attorney's Office concerning his imminent charges for sex with minors. This was in relation to the 2005 allegations of him sexually abusing a 14-year-old girl. In August 2007, a month after the fund collapsed, the US Attorney in Miami, Alexander Acosta, entered into direct discussions about the plea agreement. Acosta brokered a lenient deal, and according to him, this was because he had been ordered by high government officials who told him that Epstein was an individual of importance to the government. Basically, Acosta was told that Epstein belonged to intelligence. Now, Epstein himself had previously stated this, but he later retracted that statement. Now, in terms of the mechanism as to how Epstein became involved in the intelligence world, it's not known exactly. The actual mechanism is not known. However, it is known that Epstein became romantically involved in 1992 with the English aristocrat Ghislaine Maxwell, who he met first of all in 1991. Now, as we know, Ghislaine Maxwell was sentenced to 20 years in prison for child trafficking. But why is this relationship important when considering Epstein and his links to the intelligence world? Well, Ghislaine Maxwell's father was Robert Maxwell. Who was Robert Maxwell? His actual name, well, he had it changed and he was called Ian Robert Maxwell, but he was born Jan Ludwig Hyman Benjamin Hoch on the 10th of June 1923. And he was a Czechoslovak-born British media proprietor and Member of Parliament, and he was a suspected spy and fraudster. Early in his life, Maxwell escaped from Nazi occupation in his native country and joined the Czechoslovak army in exile during World War II, and was decorated after for his active service in the British Army. In subsequent years he worked in publishing, building up Pergamon Press to a major academic publisher, and after 6 years as a Labour MP during the 1960s, Maxwell again put all his energy into business, successfully buying the British Printing Corporation, Mirror Group newspapers and Macmillan Publishers, among other publishing companies. Robert Maxwell was suspected of being an Israeli spy. In fact, MI6 believed him to actually be a triple agent who worked for Israel, Britain and the Soviet Union. The FBI has a memo in the FBI vault, and that can be read online, and that confirms they had suspicions that Maxwell was working for the Soviet Union. Robert Maxwell may be the link as to why Epstein was said to belong to intelligence. Now, in an interview with Stephen Hoffenberg, who had employed Epstein in 1987 as a consultant at the Tower Financial Corporation, he said that Epstein was trained in moving money offshore, and that a mentor of Epstein's was someone Hoffenberg knew, and it was a British defence contractor who died in 2011 named Douglas Lees. Now, Hoffenberg claimed that Lees was an arms dealer. Lees' son Julian, however, says that is not true, but the UK parliamentary record does mention Lees in reference to the El Yamaha arms deal in the early 1980s. Hoffenberg told the journalist that was interviewing him that Lees was pivotal in understanding Jeffrey Epstein's MO, because Lees had introduced him not only to aristocrat Europeans, whom Epstein had subsequently fleeced, but to all sorts of people in the arms business, including the late Turkish-born businessman Adnan Khashoggi, and allegedly the late media mogul Robert Maxwell. Epstein had originally claimed not to know either Douglas Lees or Robert Maxwell, but in the interview, Hoffenberg stated that Epstein had said he worked on several projects with Robert Maxwell, including solving Maxwell's debt issues. Now, Maxwell had died in 1991 under very strange circumstances, apparently having fallen off his yacht, Lady Ghislaine, in the middle of the night, and it was discovered in the aftermath that he'd stolen hundreds of millions of dollars from pensions of his employees. Epstein had also told Hoffenberg that via Maxwell and Lees he was involved in something that Hoffenberg described as national security issues, which he says involved blackmail, influence trading, trading information at a level that is very serious and dangerous. 4 separate sources have gone on record stating that Epstein's dealings in the arms world in the 1980s had led him to work for multiple governments, including the Israelis. Now, some of the sources are more reliable than others, but the gist of the claims is that Maxwell, who was himself a conduit between the Israelis and other governments during his lifetime, introduced Epstein to Israeli leaders who then allegedly used Epstein as the equivalent of an old-fashioned Russian sleeper, someone who could be useful in an influence campaign. The sources range from former arms dealers to former spies, and also Hoffenberg suggests that Epstein, who lacked any sort of moral compass, decided to go one step further and compromise influential people by recording them doing things they wouldn't want made public. In the last 10 years of his life, Epstein bragged to various people, including journalists, that he was advising a whole assortment of foreign leaders who included Vladimir Putin, Mohammed bin Zayed, Mohammed bin Salman, various African dictators, Israeli and British, and of course the Americans, the governments. He also told several of the same people that he was making a fortune out of arms, drugs and diamonds. He told one person, a journalist of a similar name, that he knew the owner of the deep water port in Djibouti on the Horn of Africa, a smuggler's paradise. And he said he knew it so well that he was basically in charge of it. Now, according to sources in the intelligence world, this is hyperbole, but also not completely ridiculous, because his name was mentioned as a middleman in both Africa and the Middle East. He was known in the intelligence world as a hyperfixer, somebody who can go between different cultures and networks. Usually, these people are very silent about what they do. Yet Epstein was not silent. He had a photo of the Saudi Crown Prince on his wall, and photos of Bill Gates and all the VIPs who flocked to his salons. It's not wholly surprising, therefore, that the same sources who say they know he was some sort of intelligence asset say that he became a liability, which is why, possibly, he lost any protection and was arrested, and then he was later found dead in his prison cell. In 1987 in Tallahassee, in the United States, 2 well-dressed men were arrested in a park as they were seen with 6 children between the ages of 2 to 7 years old. All the children were filthy and they were covered in bug bites and they were hungry. Locals had seen the children urinating and defecating in the park and called the police because they were concerned. These men were arrested, and when they were arrested, they simply responded with silence and just handed over a pre-printed card which stated on them that they knew their amendment rights. They used a van to transport the children, and when the police looked in the van, it smelled terrible, as if they had been living in it, and it was filled with letters and maps. These 2 men later stated that they were the children's teachers and that they were on the way to Mexico to a school for gifted children. The children were spoken to, and one of them gave an address for where they lived, and it turned out to actually be the address of a warehouse. The warehouse was raided along with another property, and all kinds of items were discovered, such as many photos of children taking part in blood-letting rituals, one of a child in chains, and child pornography, and many documents and passports. The two oldest children, referred to as Mary and Max, were interviewed by the law enforcement, as the others were too young to properly communicate. And it was noted that at the medical examinations of the children, they'd shown signs of sexual abuse and malnourishment, as well as bite marks potentially belonging to an adult human. During the interview, as well as eyewitness testimonies from neighbours, it was discovered that the children were raised on a farm belonging to a man called Marion Petty, who he was actually the founder of this group known as the Finders. And they were raised on this farm with little adult supervision, with there being around 20 adults there, and there was another child present at this farm. The younger children were often observed to display behaviour indicating that they were not used to being in a house or using indoor plumbing, and while they were at the police station they kept requesting to go outside to use the bathroom, or they were urinating in their pants, and it was noted that they lacked underwear. Max had a poor concept of time, and they explained that they were being weaned from their mothers and were rarely allowed inside the house, even sleeping outside. Neighbours observed that the children apparently lived in the farm's watermelon field. Mary described the two men who were arrested, going by the surnames of Ammerman and Holwell, and Mary described them as the teachers, teaching them to read and play games. One game involved disrobing a man wearing his clothes and going through his pockets for money. She later revised what she said and asserted that only jackets were involved. The two reported seeing female members of the cult naked, but the children believed this to be another game as well. When Mary was questioned regarding bad touches, being touched in a bad way, Mary denied this, and she became very fidgety, and she seemed to want the interview to come to an end. At another Finders farm discovered in Virginia, agents recorded cages on the premises, with witnesses asserting that they were used to keep children. Now, I've been going through the FBI Vault. The FBI Vault is a website where you can access actual FBI material. So I've been going through the FBI Vault, and I've found documentation which I'm going to go through now, and it's regarding the investigation into these incidents relating to this group known as the Finders. Now, some of the memos are heavily redacted. There's been names taken out and parts are blocked out, so some of it is a little bit difficult, but I'm going to go through some of the salient points. So I'm going to read them. So this particular memo begins, and it says it's for a supervisory special agent, blocked out, squad C4, Washington Metropolitan Field Office. It's blocked out again, and it says Miami Division and Senior Supervisory Resident Agent, blocked out, and then West Palm Beach Agency, Miami Division, and the subject is the Finders Group, White Slave Traffic Act, Sexual Exploitation of Children, obstruction of justice preliminary inquiry. And it goes on to say that the Department of Justice has requested the FBI conduct a preliminary inquiry into allegations made by, and then the name's blocked out, concerning child sexual abuse by a group known as the Finders, and what role, if any, was played by the United States intelligence community. So we need to keep that in mind. By separate communication, the Washington Metropolitan Field Office will be provided with available documentation received to date from the Department of Justice concerning, and then it's again another word blocked out, allegations. And it says United States Customs Service, and then again it's blocked out. United States Customs Service Headquarters, Washington DC, again blocked out. And then it says also possesses documentation concerning the Finders, which is to be obtained by the Washington Metropolitan Field Office. The following information is being provided as background in the matter of Washington Metropolitan Field Office and Miami. And then it says in 1987, then there's seems to be two sentences now that were blocked out. It says, and then it goes on to say, were convicted of sexually abusing children. One of the children who attended the school during the time of the alleged abuse was, doesn't give the name. And then it says, again, there's lines blocked out, and it's hard to, you've got to start piecing this together, and it takes a while to go through it, but you start building up a picture with some of the stuff that's left in. It says, after the imposition of the prison sentences on both, so obviously there's going to be names there, and it's again the redacted out, because obviously this would be dynamite if people's names were in there. And it says, became convinced that numerous other children had been abused and that the abuse was part of a large organised scheme, a well-organised scheme, it actually says. These are FBI documents. This is what I'm reading. It's the Federal Bureau of Investigation. It's their documents on these investigations regarding child abuse and child exploitation. And it says subsequently, and it's obviously a name again that's been blocked out, has attempted to interest congressional members and the United States Customs Service in his efforts to enhance efforts in the area of child sexual abuse and investigating claims of organised sexual abuse. During October 1993, and then again there's a name, it says with the United States Congressman Rose of Florida to discuss allegations concerning a group known as the Finders. Both Congressman Rose and then the name again's gone, subsequently provided information concerning these allegations to the Department of Justice. An FBI indices search revealed a reference to the Finders, and then it gives the file name. A review of this file indicated that the FBI in Jacksonville had conducted investigation resulting from an arrest of two individuals in Tallahassee, which is the one that I referred to where the two men were arrested in the park. And it says the two subjects could not sufficiently provide sufficient information as to their legal custody of the children and were very uncooperative regarding their identity and the children's identity. And as a result of the information developed during these arrests, I think it's a Tampa police or something, it's hard to read. Some of it's sometimes the type's missing slightly, so you'll forgive me when I'm reading this. It is very difficult. These are photocopies of original documents that are online, and obviously, like I said before, there's some parts heavily redacted. There's some parts of these memos that are handwritten and they're almost impossible to read, but I'm going to do my best to paint the picture to you. It goes on to say that the Metropolitan Police Department, Washington DC, provided information concerning blocked out and their association with a group known as the Finders based in Washington DC. The Metropolitan Police Department executed search warrants prepared by the United States Attorney's Office, District of Columbia, on 2 properties owned by the finders in the Washington, D.C. area. And then it goes on about a special agent, doesn't give his name, from the United States Customs Service, and they participated in the searches. A joint investigation conducted by the MPD, Metropolitan Police Department, and the Washington Metropolitan Field Office lead to the identification and interview of the mothers of 6 of the children and 2 of the fathers and several other key members of the finders group. The WMFO, which is obviously the Washington Metropolitan Field Office, presents the results of their investigation to the Assistant United States Attorney, doesn't give the name, the United States Attorney's Office for the District of Columbia. And then it says that they declined prosecution for violation of Title 18 US Code Section 120, kidnapping, and 2251, sexual exploitation of children. So they were basically, they weren't going to be prosecuted, although these 2 men had been found with these children in this condition and did show signs of sexual abuse. It was decided by the United States Attorney's Office for the District of Columbia in Washington that there wasn't going to be a prosecution. The Department of Justice reviewed the United States Customs Service documents and indicates that during the execution of the search warrants by the Metropolitan Police at the 2 finders' properties, the United States Customs Service, and there's a name missing, claims to have observed a substantial amount of computer equipment and documents purportedly containing instructions for obtaining children for unspecified purposes. The instructions allegedly included impregnation of female members of the community, purchasing children, trading children, and kidnapping them. And then there's a heavily redacted paragraph, well, 2 paragraphs, 3 paragraphs, because I'll go to the next page, it's 3 paragraphs that's all redacted, so clearly it's pretty much dynamite, that. And so then after the redacted paragraph it says, has alleged that the finders are involved in a well-organised child abuse scheme and that, and it's missed out again, in conjunction with the State Department and the FBI's Foreign Counterintelligence Section, they conspired to cover up these abuses. So the FBI saying in the memo that the State Department and the FBI's own Foreign Counterintelligence Section that they conspired together to cover up this group's involvement in well-organised child abuse. The United States Customs Service, again, it's blocked out, should be contacted by the Washington Metropolitan Field Office to obtain complete documentation concerning the finders. The investigation by the WMFO in this matter will also involve the interview of, and then it's obviously 2 names, and the review of any documentation in the possession of, blocked out again, and then says the State Department Passport Office and Foreign Counterintelligence Division. So that's the first section of a memo. Now, as I'm scrolling further down, because I can't seem to print these off, so I've been reading them online while I'm recording this. And there is a particular memo, and it's very difficult to read because of the handwriting. It's terrible handwriting, but I can actually pick out when I'm reading it that the CIA are mentioned in conjunction with this group, the finders. So there's mention of the CIA, and as I scroll further down, because it's a large document, there's I mean, just in this first part there's over 322 pages. Now like I said before, there was claims that there was large amounts of evidence obtained on computers and everything, like I've just been reading. But I'm just going to go further down now to some further memos that are further down the document. And this particular document, subjects regarding kidnapping. And it says on the 18th of February 1987, the National Centre for Missing and Exploited Children provided the writer with the attached memorandum. And a review of the memorandum reflects obvious, and it's blocked out again, observed of what was in fact recovered by the Metropolitan Police Department during the execution of the warrants at, and then the whole address is blocked out, and there's a large section blocked out again. And it says the memorandum was brought to the attention of, so it clearly names someone, but they're from the Metropolitan Police, and they handled the matter. And it says, advise the writer that a thorough review of all evidence obtained from the two aforementioned locations did not produce any of the items described in the examples cited above, and they advised no evidence of child sexual exploitation or any related crime was obtained, and that there was no computerized list ordering children. And then it says a copy of the memorandum was provided to, and then there's 4 large sections that are redacted. So this particular memo, which is a 2-page memo, is saying, in contradiction to the memo that I read originally, which they stated that during the initial search of the warehouse and this other property, material was discovered, computer images and instructions on how to kidnap children. This further memo says that there wasn't any evidence like this. Well, the earlier memo says that there was, so clearly something's gone amiss, hasn't it, during the transfer of the evidence gathered at the warehouse from whoever attended the warehouse at the time, for it then, the next stage in the chain of custody, it should have been passed on. The police are meant to have a chain of custody, everything's bagged up, evidence signed for, the next person signs for it. It's called the chain of custody. Well, that's clearly not taken place. Furthermore, the memo, another memo, again, shows that evidence was obtained. So we've got one saying it was, then another memo saying that it wasn't obtained. And it says on this other memo, it says information obtained by the Department of Justice was discussed, and it's with the Metropolitan Field Office and Miami SSSRA, whatever that is, West Palm Beach. A teletype was prepared designating the WFMO as the origin in this matter. And then it goes on to say that articles on the LexisNexis database concerning the finders, these articles indicate that the Tallahassee Police Department, Florida, conducted a traffic stop on the van containing the 2 men and 6 children, and the 2 men were arrested, and they were each charged with child abuse. In the correspondence unit, the FBI HQ advised that they had no reference in their files concerning the finders. The State Department office files pertaining to the finders, a written request, the format will be prepared. Like I said, it's quite difficult. These are all bullet points in these in these memos. This bullet point in this same memo again says Jacksonville advised that JK was involved in an investigation with a group known as the Finders in 1987. And this case involved the recovery of the 6 children in Tallahassee, Florida, and they were travelling in a van with 2 grown males not related to them. The FBI participated in the arrest of these 2 individuals who were charged locally with 1 count of child abuse. and then a name again, blocked out, advises that many allegations have been made regarding child sexual abuse in this case, but none were proven. And it appears that there was parental consent for the children to travel with these individuals. The children were subsequently returned to their parents, and the subjects spent 10 days in local jail, and they were then released. So they were released without charge. There was ordered to be no prosecution. Evidence that had previously said to have been obtained has gone missing, although another document says that there was some. And this is the document that says that some material was recovered. It says, subsequently, the Tallahassee Police Department, making the traffic stop of the van, determined that these two men belonged to a group known as the Finders. As a result of this information developed by the Tampa Police during the traffic stop, the Tallahassee Police contacted the Washington Metropolitan Police Department, and the WMPD developed information that was subsequently utilized to obtain a search warrant for the warehouse and the residence located in Washington, D.C., owned by the Finders. US Customs and the WMPD participated in this search and it's blocked out again, and then it says, noted that approximately 7 computers and numerous computer floppy disks were seized during the search, and it says he did not participate in any subsequent review of the material. So again, there's another memo saying, even stating what it is, there were 7 computers, but a previous memo says there was no evidence obtained. Something fishy's going on here. George Bagasso, Section Chief of the Child Exploitation and Obscenity Section, Department of Justice, advised that the Department of Justice has a book of material on the Finders, and the additional material will be made available for review by the FBI. Representatives of the Violent Crimes Unit will meet with him. Goes on again, this other, regarding the arrest of these 2 men, and it says the 2 subjects with the children could not initially provide the information. Again, it's a similar sort of thing. They were uncooperative regarding the identity. Goes on to say the subjects were arrested, the FBI got involved, and then it says there was a joint investigation by the Metropolitan Police of Washington, the FBI, and they identified the mothers and 2 of the fathers. Obviously some of this is repeated. These are separate memos. It goes on to say that on the property owned by, and then it says Virginia police, search warrants did not produce evidence of federal or state violation. So there was some searches executed at another property, and it says there was no federal or state violations of the law concerning sexual exploitation of children. However, it appears that the children found in Florida, the ones that were with the 2 men in the park, that they had previously lived at that location in Virginia. So it seems that they're being moved around. I'm just going to go to another page. Now, this page it's the House of Representatives. It's a photocopy of the Congress of the United States, the House of Representatives. But before I read that, I've just overlooked something at the bottom of this particular memo. But basically, on one of these memos here, just let me find, it's regarding a particular sergeant, and this particular man he's dead now, and it says that he was basically warned off the investigation. John Steiker, deceased, it says, also advised that, like I said prior to it, if you forgive me if it's difficult to follow, it's difficult to read because a lot of it's missing, like I keep saying. So I'm reading, and obviously I'm starting part way through sentences and paragraphs because of all the information that's missing. So it says also advised that he had been told that the documentation had been located in the WMPD files to indicate that Sergeant John Steicher, deceased, so they've named him because he's deceased, who had been his sergeant during the finder's search, had been contacted by blocked out, who had told him to step away from the finder's case. So there's missing evidence. Someone investigating the case has been contacted by someone who's clearly high up and told him to step away from the case. I'll go on now to that document I'm talking about, the Congress of the United States. So basically what this document shows is, I'll read what it says first and I'll just explain. There's like a bit of a table on it, but it says in February 1991, the US Customs integrated their Child Pornography and Protection Unit into the Smuggling Investigations Division of the investigative programs. At the time, the Customs stated that these changes have in no way affected the manner in which child pornography investigations are being conducted by our field offices or the support that our headquarters staff provides. I asked the Customs to provide me with arrests, convictions and employee hours spent on child pornography and protection. Customs numbers show dramatic and inexcusable decline. So it has year 1988, arrest 106, convictions 100, employee hours 47,772. The next year it goes up to employee hours 54,613, so it's increasing. Now in 1990 it was employee hours investigating these types of crimes was up to 100,524. Then the following year it took a very large decline down to 61,173 employee hours. And again in 1992 it plummeted again to 27,435. So from having over 100,000 hours spent by employees investigating child pornography and kidnapping and all these things, it dropped in a 2-year space to 27,435. So they're just basically cutting investigation into such a serious matter as that, and this is obviously come from a high level. Now I'm just going to go through the actual, there's a document that just quickly shows the chronology of this finder's sort of investigation. So it says contact of the US Customs Tallahassee Police Department regarding discovery of unidentified children and adult male guardians in City Park. Requested contact with Washington MPD for assistance in locating possible address of relatives of children. Address located with assistance of MPD Intelligence Division. Second address identified. 1 residence, 1 warehouse. Search warrants obtained by MPD Intel. Warehouse site and previous MPD Intel inquiry involving classified maps of underground tunnels and sewer system, Washington DC. During the search warrant staging, disclosure of pending search warrant execution made by Tallahassee PD to the local media. Tallahassee media representative contact DC media for more details. DC media reps pursued public information at courthouses and are waiting at the search warrant sites for the MPD search teams. Search warrants executed with the MPD and 2 US Customs agents, 1 at each site. FBI not involved until walkthrough of following day. Seizure of numerous documents to include passports, telexes, computer and electronic media, correspondence. So again, they're saying in this memo there was stuff, but it went missing. After the search warrant shut down on the first day, news reports carried FBI press release announcing the FBI as lead investigation agent. Day after, 1 search resumed. FBI agent from Washington field office makes walkthrough of warehouse but does not examine any evidence. Additional search warrant executed on farm in rural Virginia with support by Virginia State Police. No federal involvement. Evidence of satanic cult ritual discovered. Based on observed documents, customs agents unsuccessfully attempt to gain access to evidence for detailed analysis for use in investigating possible export, Neutrality Act, Mann Act and child pornography violations. So again, there's obstructions being put in place to gaining information regarding child sex exploitation. Apologise to any listeners who found it hard to follow in that last segment, but it was very difficult documents to read with so much information being blocked out, and I wasn't able to print it off, so I was scrolling through as I was recording. But I hope it gave you an overall picture of this investigation and some of the corruption. So how does all that link this group, the Finders, Jeffrey Epstein and the CIA? Well, firstly, I think I need to define what is meant by direct evidence and circumstantial evidence. Direct evidence is when person A sees person B with a gun and he sees them shoot person C, so it's straightforward. Circumstantial evidence is when person A sees person B and person C, they enter a shed. Person A then hears a gunshot. Person A then sees person B exit the shed. Person A then goes into the shed and sees person C lying on the floor in a pool of blood. Now, it would be reasonable to conclude that person B has shot person C, although person A did not actually see that take place. However, it would be a reasonable conclusion to the evidence. So, let's look at the circumstantial evidence. In 2005, Epstein's Palm Beach property was raided by the FBI in regards to the allegations made of sexual abuse of the 14-year-old girl. The FBI, when searching the property, realised that the items had been removed from the house prior to the search, including computers. Now, the FBI concluded that Epstein had been tipped off prior to the raid. Alexander Acosta, an attorney and former Secretary of Labour in Donald Trump's administration, said he was ordered by high-up US government officials to broker a lenient plea deal, I mentioned it before, for Epstein because he was told of his importance and that it belonged to intelligence. So basically Epstein literally just got no more than a slap on the wrist, essentially, for sexually abusing a 14-year-old girl. Now, what sickens me is who thinks that that's acceptable to simply just hand him what was no more than a slap on the wrist because he is involved in the intelligence world. Who, high up, decides to make a decision like that when he's sexually abused a young girl, another human being, an image bearer of God? He traumatised her, and someone whose moral compass is way off thought it's acceptable to warn this Alexander Acosta to broker a lenient deal. Epstein had been in a relationship with Ghislaine Maxwell. daughter of Robert Maxwell, the suspected triple agent. Now, Robert Maxwell died in suspicious circumstances himself. He went missing off his yacht in the Atlantic Ocean off the Canary Islands. Maxwell was afforded a lavish funeral in Israel, and it was attended by Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Shamir, Israeli President Shem Herzog, and at least 6 serving and former heads of Israeli intelligence, and many dignitaries and politicians, both government and opposition, and he was buried on the Mount of Olives in Jerusalem. Epstein had also told Stephen Hoffenberg that via Maxwell he was involved in something that Hoffenberg described as national security issues, which he says involved blackmail, influence trading, trading information at a very high level that is very serious and very dangerous. Epstein mixed with many powerful and influential people who he took on Epstein's plane, which Epstein himself called the Lolita Express. He never used to hide this thing, called it the Lolita Express. And the local people who lived in the area on the island, they actually named the island where Epstein took these influential people and these young girls. They called it Paedophile Island. Some of the rich and powerful people include Bill Clinton, who travelled with Epstein in 2002 and 2003. Kevin Spacey. Donald Trump was also an associate of Epstein. Bill Gates, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and Prince Andrew, as we all know, in the UK. After he was convicted, Epstein, Prince Andrew was seen with him. So even though Prince Andrew knew he was a convicted sex offender, still was associating with him. Now all these people were named by Epstein's former pilot of nearly 30 years, Larry Vysotsky, or Lawrence Paul Vysotsky Jr., and he piloted the Boeing 727, which is Epstein's private jet. Now, documents obtained by the Wall Street Journal show that after Epstein's conviction for the sex crimes in 2008, that along with other people that he met, he actually went on to have meetings with the then director of the CIA. The CIA and possibly Mossad had links with Epstein, and it's important to know that the US and the Israeli interest are very, very closely aligned. The 2 Finders men arrested in the Tallahassee park were, by the 17th of March 1987, they were released from custody by the Tallahassee police for lack of evidence. The children were returned to the mothers, and the whole thing was dismissed as a terrible misunderstanding made worse by miscommunication and sensationalism. The story would have ended there were it not for the US Customs Special Agent Ramon Martinez. Martinez and Senior Special Agent Bob Harold had assisted and executed the search warrants at the Finders' properties. Martinez claimed in a memorandum that numerous documents were discovered which appeared to be concerned with international trafficking in children, high-tech transfer to the United Kingdom, and international transfer of currency. After multiple attempts to review this evidence, including arranging a meeting with the Metropolitan Police Detective James Bradley, that's the Metropolitan Police in London, Martinez claimed that he was told by an unnamed third party, believed by independent journalist Elizabeth Voss to have been MPD Sergeant George Stitcher, who I mentioned, who had been warned off the case, that he'd said that all the passport data had been turned over to the State Department. The investigation into the Finders had become a CIA internal matter, and the MPD report had been classified as secret and was not available for review. Intelligence services such as the CIA, MI6 and Mossad use tactics of disinformation and blackmail. And one common tactic is the honey trap. It was commonly used in Northern Ireland on soldiers. They used to lure them to places, girls would chat them up and everything, and then the IRA get involved. And it's also often involves secret agencies getting close to a particular high-level target, such as a high-level politician. And it's usually an agent themselves, so maybe a female agent or whatever. They would seduce them and have sex with them, and then this would be captured on either video or still photographs. The target would then be told by another agent at some point about what they'd been up to, and told them now that they belonged to the intelligence organisation, and they would now do what they were told, or the evidence of their wrongdoing would be made public. And this is something that's happening now with children. It used to happen with politicians back in the years when it was illegal to be a homosexual. If they were homosexual, or they'd set them up with another homosexual, they'd be filmed or whatever, and then they'd be warned, listen, we know what you've been doing, we've got evidence, you belong to us now. The Finders and Jeffrey Epstein were both being used by the intelligence services as part of a global trafficking network that supplies children to high-level individuals in order for them to sexually abuse them. This is happening. These high-level individuals are then advised that they've been videoed or photographed carrying out these wicked abuses, and now they're compromised, and they will do what they're instructed by the intelligence services. Now, most of these children, the unaccompanied children, they're taken from third world countries, they're trafficked across the world. They're basically orphans, so no one's going to miss them. The CIA and other intelligence services, in conjunction with the cabals, they traffic children around the world. Human trafficking for sexual exploitation is estimated to be worth approximately $100 billion globally. Only the drug trade is more profitable in the terms of the crime world. Now, anyone is rightly outraged with this abominable practice that's going on. It's a network by intelligence services stealing children. They're stealing children for their own ends to use to bribe people and blackmail them. How wicked is that? But one of the things that I've been thinking about over the last few days is that if you don't believe that there's a God and you just believe we come from nothing, then you don't actually have any kind of right or reason to be outraged. And what I mean by that is this, that if you don't believe that God created human beings and they were created in His image and that basically were just matter in motion, then murder isn't murder, it's just killing. And rape's not rape, it's just sex. But as a Christian, I believe that mankind was created in the image of God, with the image bearers of God. Each individual person, their soul is worth more than the whole world put together. That murder is murder. It's not just killing. Killing a human being is murder. And raping them is a capital offence. Stealing them, men stealing in the Bible, it's called men stealing when they take someone from somewhere, a country of origin, and they take them away for purposes, various purposes. It might just be to work them as a slave or sexual exploitation. But such behaviour is actually a capital crime, and God says that such people should be put to death. There should be the death penalty for rapists, and there should be the death penalty for murderers. I take comfort in this fact. Luke chapter 12, verse 2 to 3. For there is nothing covered that shall not be revealed, neither hid that shall not be known. Therefore, whatsoever you have spoken in darkness shall be heard in the light, and that which you have spoken in the ear, in the closets, shall be proclaimed upon the housetops. Isaiah chapter 29 verse 15. Woe unto them that seek deep to hide their counsel from the Lord, and their works are in the dark. And they say, who seeth us? Who knoweth us? Well, the Lord sees them. He sees these children being trafficked, and there will be final justice in the end. Epstein, right now, is burning in the fires of hell. This has been a heavy topic, and in one way I'm glad to get it over with, but it's an important topic, and these works of darkness need exposing. People don't want to believe that this type of thing is taking place because it rocks the world, it takes them out of their comfort zone. But this is happening. Intelligence services, the cabals, they're involved. People at high levels are abusing children on a massive scale. Thank you all for listening. I hope you'll join me again on Beyond the Paradigm. If you want to contact me with any suggestions of topics that you want to listen to, or if you've got any information that you want to give me, any stories about strange things you might have seen, I'd welcome anyone to email me at beyondtheparadigm@yahoo.com. Thank you again for listening, and I'll be back with you next week on Beyond the Paradigm.